What if justice was just a costume and revenge was the only script left unwritten? At the tail end of the Cold War, America's silver screen was no longer just entertainment. It became a pressure valve. The late 80 seconds and early 90 seconds were soaked in action films that looked like fiction but felt like confessions. Beneath the flying fists, exploding compounds, and gunmetal glory, some of these stories carried something else: resentment, guilt, warnings too raw for polite audiences. The market demanded simplicity. Studios wanted heroes. But what they got, hidden beneath VHS boxes and B-movie posters, were characters grappling with broken systems, governments that protected monsters, legal frameworks that let killers walk free, and wars that never really ended. They weren't just action movies, they were accusations, and maybe that's why they vanished. Some were dumped into bargain bins, others aired at midnight and disappeared. A few were recut beyond recognition, but together they whispered a darker truth, one that Hollywood never wanted echoed. These are the 5 films that revealed what Hollywood tried to hide. Film 1, Diplomatic Immunity, 1991. When the law protects the guilty, justice has to go rogue. Released in 1991 and directed by Peter Maris, Diplomatic Immunity stars Bruce Boxleitner as a grieving father and Vietnam veteran, and Billy Drago as a sadistic killer cloaked in legal privilege. On the surface, it's a straightforward revenge thriller, a retired soldier tracking down his daughter's murderer in a foreign land. It came wrapped in the aesthetics of low-budget action. Grainy explosions, morally upright leads, and villains with European accents. But buried beneath the B-movie veneer is something far more subversive, a quiet fury at the idea that law itself can become untouchable. The villain here isn't just a killer, he's the son of a diplomat, shielded by international treaties, free to walk away from the carnage he causes. When local authorities shrug, and even US officials admit they're powerless, the protagonist turns inward and violent. It's not the plot that feels dangerous. It's the implication that there are some crimes the system was never meant to prosecute. The film never shouts this theme. It lets it simmer in dark embassies, sterile courtrooms, and the silent, sleepless eyes of a father who has already seen war once and is ready to enter another. Critics mostly ignored it. Theatrical release was non-existent. And in an era where diplomacy was being rebranded as the civilized answer to conflict, Diplomatic Immunity dared to ask, what if diplomacy is what stops justice from happening at all? The final scene is cold, not triumphant, just resolved. A man doing what needed to be done because no one else would. Sometimes, the law doesn't fail. It just refuses to try. Film 2, The Last Match, 1991. When you're sentenced to die, the only escape left is a game. At first glance, The Last Match feels like pure pulp. Directed by Fabrizio De Angelis, it stars Ernest Borgnine and Henry Silva in a plot that sounds absurd. A group of ex-football players infiltrate a Central American prison to rescue a warden's daughter. Their cover? A rigged American football match between inmates and guards. It reads like satire, but what plays out on screen is anything but comedic. This isn't The Longest Yard. There's no redemption arc. The prison is a fortress of abuse, its walls soaked in blood and silence. Corrupt officials trade in human life. The justice system is portrayed as transactional, foreign policy as theater, and diplomacy as a smokescreen for cruelty. When diplomacy fails, the film suggests America exports not peace but violence dressed in patriotism. What makes The Last Match so unsettling isn't its absurd premise. It's how it leans into the madness with a straight face. The football field becomes a battleground, where helmets and shoulder pads are swapped for grenades and live rounds. There's no illusion left. The sport is a metaphor not for hope or teamwork, but for war as entertainment. The film was quietly shelved in most countries, and US distribution was nearly non-existent. Critics who did see it called it tasteless, exploitative. But perhaps that was the point. It held up a broken mirror to a culture that cheered for heroes on Sunday and ignored human rights abuses the rest of the week. In the final frame, there are no medals, just bodies, and a question that echoes louder than the explosions. How far will a country go to protect its image, even if it means weaponizing its games? Film 3, Martial Law, Undercover, 1991. He upheld the law until he saw who was hiding behind it. Directed by Kurt Anderson, Martial Law 2, Undercover stars Jeff Wincott and Cynthia Rothrock, two names synonymous with 90 seconds martial arts cinema. Marketed as a straightforward sequel to the 1990 actioner Martial Law, this entry promised more kicks, more crime, and more chaos in the backstreets of Los Angeles. On the surface, it delivered exactly that. Cops going undercover, taking down a crime syndicate, and settling everything with spinning roundhouse kicks and shattered glass. But beneath the adrenaline is something colder. This isn't a film about justice, it's about decay from within. The enemy here isn't just a drug lord or a gang leader. It's the very system sworn to protect citizens. Corrupt officers, secret deals, a chain of command that rewards silence and punishes truth. The deeper Wincott's character goes undercover, the more he realizes that the lines separating law enforcement and criminal enterprise are blurred, maybe non-existent. It's easy to dismiss Martial Law 2 as another VHS-era action flick, but its portrayal of institutional rot, of officers complicit in the very crimes they're supposed to fight, feels disturbingly current. There are no monologues, no courtroom revelations, just quiet realizations in empty parking lots, dark alleys, and flickering locker rooms. The action is the metaphor. Every punch is a question. Who do you serve when the badge means nothing anymore? The film received little theatrical release and faded quickly into the sea of 90 seconds martial arts titles. But for those who watched closely, it wasn't just fists flying, it was trust-breaking. Sometimes, the scariest villains wear the same uniform. And sometimes, justice can only be restored by stepping outside the law. Film 4, The Expert, 1995. When the courtroom fails, the executioner learns to aim alone. The Expert, directed by Rick Avery and William Lustig, stars Jeff Speakman as a former Special Forces soldier turned vigilante. The premise is brutally simple. His sister is murdered, the killer is caught, and yet the justice system, tangled in appeals and moral hesitation, refuses to act. So he does. To the casual viewer, it's another 90 seconds revenge flick. A by-the-numbers vigilante tale with courtrooms, prison infiltrations, and tactical takedowns. It was marketed with grit posters showing Speakman stoic, armed, determined. But what sets The Expert apart isn't its action, it's its bitterness. The film burns with disillusionment. Its portrayal of the legal system is hollow, bureaucratic, and intentionally impotent. Lawyers smile while families grieve. Appeals become shields for the guilty. The killer, a smug manipulator, thrives within the technicalities of law, not in spite of them. And behind it all, a moral question simmers. When the system refuses to pull the trigger, is it still wrong if you do it yourself? There are no heroes here, just rage, and the quiet acknowledgement that the world no longer believes in closure, only outcomes. Speakman's character doesn't seek peace. He seeks control. Control that the court denied him. Control that the law will not share. Originally intended to be a more psychological drama, The Expert was reportedly re-edited by producers to emphasize action over introspection. What remained was a strange hybrid, a brutal vigilante film haunted by the ghost of a deeper idea. It didn't last in theaters. Critics brushed it off as another revenge fantasy. But maybe that's because the fantasy wasn't just vengeance, it was accountability. And in a world where killers walk free and victims are forgotten, The Expert asked one dangerous question. Who gets to deliver the final sentence when the judge closes the book too soon? FILM. Oh, laser mission. Chungubek Parshipku. He was sent to stop a weapon and became one instead. Laser Mission, directed by Bo J. Davis, stars Brandon Lee in one of his earliest leading roles. On the surface, it's a Cold War caper, a secret agent racing to prevent a nuclear scientist from falling into enemy hands. There are diamonds, double crosses, desert chases, all dressed in the bright, pulpy colors of late 80 seconds action. The poster promised gadgets, explosions, and the charisma of a rising martial arts star. But buried in the absurdity is a haunting premonition. This film wasn't just a spy romp, it was a reflection of a world where ideologies had blurred and war had become performance. The laser itself, a MacGuffin of immense, undefined power, symbolizes how easily destructive tools are pursued under the guise of protection. Every country wants the weapon. Every player claims righteousness. And the agent in the middle, played by Lee, realizes that he's not there to stop war, he's there to maintain the illusion of peace through fear. The production was troubled. Shot mostly in Namibia with a fraction of the budget it needed, The film was delayed, recut, and re-released under multiple names. In the US, it barely surfaced. Internationally, it was often marketed without Lee's name. Only after his later fame did it find attention. But by then, the tragedy had set in. Brandon Lee's own life, cut short on a film set, mirrored the film's own strange arc. Bright promise turned into silence. Looking back, Laser Mission feels like more than a lost spy flick. It's a metaphor for the disposable agents in a geopolitical game men turned into myths and stories turned into shadows. In the end, the mission isn't to retrieve the weapon. It's to understand that the weapon was always the mission. Bonus fact: Cover Up 1991. There's a film that rarely makes any list, not because it failed, but because it was never meant to be noticed. Cover Up 1991. Directed by Manny Cotto and starring Dolph Lundgren, masqueraded as a simple military thriller. A terrorist attack in the Middle East. An American journalist trying to uncover the truth. Explosions, uniforms, the flag flying high. But beneath that camouflage is a film so politically uneasy, it almost vanished. Lundgren plays a reporter, not a soldier, tracing a bombing that killed U.S. servicemen. But every answer he finds leads not to foreign enemies, but to American hands. The deeper he digs, the clearer it becomes. The violence was staged, the narrative manipulated, and the real objective wasn't justice, it was justification. What Cover Up implied just months after the Gulf War was dangerous. That the greatest threat to truth might come from within the institutions that claim to protect it. The film touches on false flag operations, media manipulation, and government agents who silence inconvenient truths. It's a whisper about control and what happens when stories are weaponized. Predictably, the film received a muted release. It was marketed as standard action fare, stripped of its thematic weight in trailers and posters. Critics dismissed it. Studios buried it under louder titles. But those who saw it, and really listened, felt something deeper, that the cover-up wasn't just on screen. Some films fail on screen, others were never even allowed to fail. What ties these films together isn't just their obscurity, it's their defiance. They wore the skin of action thrillers, dressed in the cliches of their time. Secret agents, rogue soldiers, corrupted systems, shadowy threats. But deep beneath their stunt choreography and bullet-riddled frames, these movies whispered something more dangerous than any explosion. Disbelief. Disbelief in diplomacy, in justice, in the myth of clean wars and perfect systems. Each film, from the father hunting a protected killer to the vigilante, stepping over courtroom walls, pushed back against the comfortable lie that the system always works. They didn't offer hope. They offered confrontation. And maybe that's why they vanished. They weren't subtle. They didn't fit neatly into genre shelves. Some were too angry, some too honest. Others just came too soon, asking questions we weren't ready to answer. What happens when the heroes don't trust the law? When sports become weapons? When the good guy kills, not because he has to, but because the courts won't? We remember the blockbusters. But it's the forgotten films that often carried the rawest truths. Because in cinema, every reel hides a reality, and every cut hides a confession. Which of these films do you think revealed too much, and which one deserved to be seen uncensored? Real secrets, where the truth was always in the edit.